glorious and victorious. Glorious and victorious.
Yes.
That sounds so good.
Come on.
Who wouldn't desire to have glorious and victorious? You know, as I began to prepare for this week, even though that sounded so wonderful, I found it very difficult to really focus in on exactly what that meant and how that applies to our church. So, as I meditated and prayed on this, God guided me in His grace in verses in Romans. And so we're going to be in Romans 12 tonight. If you guys would like to follow along. I'm reading through the New King James Version. So we'll be in Romans 12 starting at verse 9. And here in 12, Paul is giving directions to the saints in Rome, describing how Christ's church should function. Starting in verse 9, he says, "Let love be without hypocrisy." He doesn't ask if we should love, who we should love, or when we should love, but rather he assumes the church is love. But his caution is that we stand guard against hypocrisy. How many times have we heard the excuse from someone that they don't attend church because some member has offended them through what they thought was a hypocritical act? Far too often. So how can we avoid this? Can we be an effective church if we stand for nothing because we're afraid? Afraid that what we say may offend someone else? I don't think so. But we can say things in love. And we can take care not to judge another's heart. Paul clarifies this as he continues on, and he says, "Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preferences to one another." Honor. You know, last week Christy did a great job as she was breaking down the meanings of victorious. And she used the root word kabod, which was translated into honor. So to be victorious, we must honor one another. I like that. That sounds good. Good enough. I think we should repeat it. To be victorious, we must honor one another. And he continues in verse 11, "Not lagging in diligence, reverent in spirit, serving the Lord." Key word in that verse, serving. Brings up questions of how long should we serve? Who should we serve? Obviously, we should probably try to serve continually and serve each other in the church and also in our community. You know, last year I really loved what our church did when we had 30 days of random acts of kindness. What a great lesson to change our mindset and to really learn what it is to serve. I think that was a great exercise, and hopefully we can do that again. I think it was a great idea. By serving one another, we honor each other. And again, through honor, we are a victorious church. Starting to see a pattern here. Continue in verse 12, rejoicing in hope. Rejoicing. What is it that we hope for? The return of our Lord and Savior, and ultimately our redemption through Christ. Previously in Romans in chapter 5, verse 2, Paul states, "Through whom also we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and rejoice in hope of the glory of God." This is the good news. We should rejoice. Do we walk in a positive outlook and attitude? To be a glorious church, I think we have to be positive. Then further on he says, be patient in tribulation, steadfastly in prayer. You know, life happens. If you're not going through some sort of tribulation now, you probably soon will be. The key to surviving this trials is prayer. How can we possibly be a victorious church without prayer? And now further into verse 14, bless those who persecute you. Oh boy, we're not just talking about someone who has a difference of opinion here. We're actually talking about someone who's actually attacking us. I don't know about you, that's a real tough one. So, how do we bless somebody that persecutes us? Only by giving it to God through prayer on their behalf. But how many of us actually pray for our enemies? I know I have a real hard time with that. Thankfully, in verse 15, it gets a little easier. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Whew, I can do that one. That's much easier. Weep with those who weep. You know, if we really love one another, how can we not be compassionate and sensitive to them in their time of need? And then finally in verse 16, be of the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Humble, I think, is the key word there. Do not be wise in your own opinion. We can reference this also in Ephesians 2 and 3, where he says, let nothing be done in selfless ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem each other better than himself. You know, I think we all hear over and over throughout the Word that we need to humble ourselves. And on the surface, I think we try. Certainly a challenge. And I know people think they're humble. But how do you know? How do you know how humble you truly are? So a test I just posed to you, if someone offers to help you or serve you, how gracious are you? Do you accept offers, or do you say, no, I got this? I being the main key there. I, and belief in myself, I have this. So I have a confession to make that humility has not always been an easy thing for me, especially when I was younger. I spoke last time and touched briefly on a near-death experience that I went through, and I chose to stop and not really go into details because we had visitors with young children here, and it is a bit of a graphic story, so I'd like to expand a little bit, and I just ask for a little understanding if someone would be offended or upset by it. So to explain the situation, let me go back. I didn't have a lot to be humble when I was growing up. In high school, I had the tiger by the tail. I lettered in 4 sports. I was a captain of the football team, captain of the wrestling team, track star. I had everything anybody could ask for. Tons of friends. Life was good. So humility doesn't come easy for me. But God has a way of getting our attention sometimes. And sometimes He'll reach out and give you a little tap. And if you don't listen, He'll tap you a little harder. I call that the Gibbs effect. If any of you watched NCIS, Gibbs always gives you a whack upside the back of the head when he needs to get your attention. Well, I didn't listen very good, so God whacked me upside the head. So this is kind of what happened with me. When I graduated, I decided to work and go to the local community college so I could save some money and just get my associates out of the way. So while I was doing that, I was working at a full-service lumber company, a home improvement store. And the company did a lot of new construction and full remodel. So we had a wonderful kitchen cabinet center where you could have all the cabinetry you needed. We received all the cabinets from one place in North Carolina, and they came once a year, and it was really a big deal for our company. So every year, they packed up train cars full of cabinetry, and everybody that worked there, we all headed to the train cars to go and unload them. And they were billed and shipped by how many you fit in a car. You were charged by the car. So they packaged them in a way to not damage them. They built 1x2 frames around the cabinetry and then wrapped and stapled them in cardboard to keep them from getting scratched up. So we had spent all afternoon on a hot summer day unloading the docks of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cabinets. And after setting them on the docks, we'd fill them onto all of our trucks and take them back to the yard. And the trucks had become full. We had no more space, and we still had a lot of cabinetry there. And it had been, like I said, it was a hot day. And so my boss said, you know, we're going to run back and just drop all these off, and we'll be back to get you. And you just take a break. You've been working hard, and relax and just be with the cabinets so they don't walk away. So there I stayed by myself. And there was many cabinets there that I was sitting by, and one of them was a freestanding walk-in utility closet. And it was probably maybe the size of that telephone booth, about 6 foot tall, 3 feet wide, weighed about 400 some pounds. And when they packaged that one and they forced it into the train car, they busted up the frame around it that was holding it together in a 1x2 frame. And the guys that unloaded that one, I didn't know that it wasn't stable. And so I took a break and sat back on the cement loading dock and put my hands behind my head and closed my eyes and just enjoying a cool breeze on a hot summer day. And unbeknownst to me, the box wasn't stable and the breeze blew the cabinet over. And I sat 5.5 feet away from a 6-foot cabinet, and as it fell, the top end of the cabinet came across and landed on my face. And when it hit me, it broke my arm and crushed my face, and I forced it off me and sat up, and as I brought my hands to my face where the pain was, it was as if someone had thrown a whole bucket of blood right in my lap. It was blood everywhere, and I was struggling to breathe. Didn't know what to do. I knew I was in trouble, and I looked around, and there was one little truck that they left there that was just a van. So I went over to the van and had a two-way radio, so I tried to call our dispatch to get help. And when I tried to speak, the impact had broken the upper roof of my mouth and broke my jaw, and about 2 inches wide, and crushed my sinuses. So when I tried to speak, my tongue just went into my sinuses, and it was ineligible. No one could understand anything I was saying. So I finally gave up with that and dropped it. And I looked around, and there's nobody at the train cars, and about 2 blocks down, there's a housing development. So I made myself down to the development, and where the road ended, there was a 6-foot chain link fence to get into the subdivision. So I climbed over the fence and fell into someone's garden, got to their front door, and knocked on the door, and the screen was closed and locked, but the door was open, and there was an older couple sitting in the living room watching TV. And when they saw me, I'm assuming they were scared, is the only thing I can think of, because they didn't answer the door. They just sat and looked at me and were maybe afraid to answer. And after some frustration, I decided, hey, I got to have some help. And out of desperation, I punched my fist through their screen and began to tear the door off the frame. And the neighbor across the street was out watering his lawn. And as he was watering it, he sees me busting down his neighbor's door. So he flighted across the street and laid a nice tackle on me, and we tumbled on the front lawn until he rolled over and noticed what a mess I was and yelled to the people to call for some help. So it seemed like a long time. The paramedics finally showed up, and I have to tell you, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone, because I had Laurel and Hardy EMTs, and they asked me questions and I couldn't speak. They asked me what happened, and where. Then they finally said, well, where does it hurt? And I'd point to my face, and they're like, yeah, you broke your nose. And I'm thinking, I could care less about my nose. I've broken it 3 or 4 other times. I can tell that, the roof of my mouth and everything is crushed, and is bleeding into my lungs, and I can't breathe. So I'm choking and coughing 2 or 3 times to just grasp a breath of air. And so after they looked back and forth and talked about it, and I finally kind of pointed into my mouth, and the one guy got his pen light out, and he looked up into my mouth, and he said, "Holy cow, Fred, come look at this. Have you ever seen anything like that?" "No, I never seen anything like that." "Well, how do you think we're going to handle this?" "Well, I don't know. I don't know how to manage that. I don't know how to, do this." So they sat and argued back and forth, and I just kept thinking to myself, can I just please get to the hospital? I need help. And after some time, they called in and they decided, okay, we're going to get him to the hospital. So they put me in the back of the ambulance, tried to lay me on a gurney, but if I laid back or forward at all, I couldn't breathe. I was just coughing blood everywhere. And I remember the one paramedic got really mad at me because I was coughing blood all over his white outfit, and he was upset about that. And so he set me in the back by myself, and they got in the front. And it was about rush hour time, about 5 o'clock. Fortunately, I was only 5 minutes from a local hospital, but they decided they would sit there in traffic and eat their lunch. So they pulled out some Whoppers and fries and started having lunch while I sat in the back of the ambulance in traffic. And I'm thinking, what does it take to get the sirens and make this thing move a little bit? But after about 45 minutes, we arrived at the emergency room. When I got to the emergency room, again, they tried to lay me down, and I couldn't lay down. I couldn't breathe. So the nurses came in, and the doctors looked at me, and they said, we need to take some tests to see the extent of the damages. We need to get you in and take some MRIs and so forth so we can see what we need to be doing here. And so I said, yeah, I couldn't talk, but I'm willing to do whatever they need to do. So we went into a room, and the nurse had me sit there, and she says, okay, you have to lay down in this machine, and we'll go in and take some pictures. And every time she tried to lay me down, I couldn't breathe. And they didn't understand that, so I'd argue with them, fight with them, and she finally got mad, and she said, look, if you don't have surgery, you're not going to make it. And if we don't take these tests, we can't do the surgery. So you got to cooperate with this. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do what I can do. In my head, I'm thinking. And so she gets me laid down on this machine, and I'm holding my breath, and they zip me into the side of it. And it's one of those big whole room things with a circle in it. And I'm down inside there, and she says, okay, I'm going to start the test. Hold still and don't breathe. This is only going to take about 45 minutes. So I come crawling out of there. Whew, and I'm like, I can't hold my breath. I'm just trying to just breathe, It was terrible. So, of course, that made her mad, and they argued some more. And about this time, they'd asked me who I am, what's your name, where you're from, and I got frustrated. I couldn't talk with them. So finally I remembered I got my wallet in my pocket. So I took my wallet out and gave it to them. And so they were able to contact my parents, and I'm sitting in the emergency room, and they go walking by. And they walked back by, and couple times, and then they came and shuffled through the clothes at the end of my bed and realized, oh, that was me, because I was so unrecognizable they couldn't even tell that I was their own son. So one of the things I remember is sitting on the gurney, and I'd lost so much blood I was freezing. It was so cold, and they wrapped hot towels around me, and I was still cold. And I remember I was getting lightheaded and weak and couldn't sit up, and I remember my dad holding my arm to keep me from falling over. And I knew if I fell over, I wouldn't be able to breathe, and I would suffocate and die. So I was just fighting to stay conscious and stay sitting up. And the nurses came in, and the doctors looked at me, and they said, we don't know what to do. We have to get these tests, or we're kind of stuck. We don't know how to help you. And about this time, from talking to a friend of mine that I worked with earlier, he had gone to where we were working, obviously, and I wasn't there, and they found blood everywhere, and he was concerned about me, so off to the closest hospital he went, and he came in the emergency room and found me, and he said that he saw I was in really bad shape, and he knew he needed to do something to help, so he ran back out. And what he found out is as he ran through the double doors going out to the emergency room area, he ran square into the leader of his church. It was a religious leader. Almost knocked him over. He ran straight into him. And this guy was there to be with another member that was sick at the hospital, to visit them. So he brought him back in, and they came to me and administered to me, and when they prayed over me, the one gentleman anointed my head with oil, and I remember as he did, he began to pray in Jesus' name with strength and power, and it burned hot like fire through my head, burned, and as it got to my face, a relief came over me and a calmness, and by the time it got to my chest, I began to be able to breathe a little bit without struggling and fighting for air. And I knew at that point, I didn't know how, but I was going to be okay. I had a peace and a calm about me, and I was feeling more comfortable, and I was able to at least get through enough tests that they came back, and 3 or 4 doctors came to me, and at this point, it happened about 3 o'clock, and now it's about 9:30 at night. And they said, the damage is so extensive, you won't survive without surgery, but nobody here has the knowledge and ability. If we operate on you, you wouldn't make it. So I'm 19 years old, and they're telling me that I have no chance, and I didn't accept that. I said, no, this is not happening. They said, well, there's only one guy that would attempt this, and he's on call tonight. He's off. And back then, they didn't have cell phones. So they tried to page him and hadn't got a hold of him, and so they waited and waited, and about 10 o'clock at night, he finally got home, and they called him in, and they began to prep me for surgery. So a little moving forward, I got to know the doctor very well, and he gave me a lot of information about what happened and how things transpired. So we went into surgery about 10:30 at night, and he said he'd been on a double shift the 2 nights before, and he was exhausted, and about 3 or 4 in the morning, after working and doing whatever he could do, he realized there wasn't anything else that could happen for me. So he came out and told my parents to come in and say goodbye, and I wouldn't make it through the night. And he called his father, who was a retired surgeon, and he said, come in and help me, because I'm beyond myself. I have no more to give, and I need to do something. And then he said when he went back in, he started doing procedures that he had no really knowledge of what he was doing. So God just took over his hands, and he was able to work through the night. And I woke up 3 days later in ICU. My face was swollen to the point that I couldn't see. My eyes were closed, swollen shut. And I remember the nurses would come in and rub Vaseline on my eyes and try to get them open where I could see it all. And the first night I was conscious, the gentleman on the one side of me in the middle of the night had a heart attack, and he flatlined, and the sirens went off, and the lights flashed, and people ran everywhere, and they put the paddles on him and shocked him, and holy cow, I'm telling you, I grew up watching Emergency 51 on TV, and that is not what it's like. Those guys say clear for a reason, because he jumped about 4 feet off the table, and he was shocked, and I was like, holy cow, this is terrible. So he didn't make it, and they pulled a sheet over his face and wheeled him up next to my bed and left him there until the next morning when the people that come in to take him back down to the morgue. So he left him there. The second night, the lady on the other side, she dies. So the third night, I'm laying there and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'm not next. This is not how I'm going to go. And I just remember that I was so completely void of any ability that I couldn't move anything. And I sat and looked. I had one finger that was out of the sheet, and I looked at my finger for what seemed like an hour, and I said to myself, if I can make that finger move, then I can prove to myself that I'm going to get through this. And so with every ounce of my will and energy, I was able to just make that finger move. And so we went through 3 months of sitting in the hospital, and 5 surgeries later, they were able to rebuild my face. So everything is gone here. They're all stainless steel. There's no bones at all. My cheekbones are pinned together, and the roof of my mouth is all wired shut, and knocked all my teeth out, of course. And I guess my teeth came through here. And the really things that were miraculous is afterwards, the surgeon told my parents, well, he's going to make it, but he's going to have brain damage. And then there were so much bones and stuff I was picking behind his eyes that he will be blind for sure. And from there, okay, I guess he's going to be conscious and, cognizant, and I could see. And they even talked about, it's going to be, we're going to have to reset all your teeth or see if we can do oral surgery to get you back together. And they wired my jaw shut, my mouth together. And after 6 months, they took the wires off, and I was able to actually chew and use my teeth, and they reset in my jaw, and I didn't wear braces for even a day. So one day I was moving years after, and I thought, I come across a drawer and I found a mouthpiece from when I played football, and they're molded to fit your mouth. And it was before this happened. I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder how much different it is. and I put it in and it fit like it did the day I wore it. So I had complete restoration, perfect to the spot that I was at. It wasn't instantaneous healing, but I know that was the only thing that got me through it. So the Lord has put on my heart to share that, and hopefully will strengthen other people. But through that, I learned many things. The first thing I learned was patience, because if you lay in a hospital for 3 months when you're used to running 24/7, it's a very challenging predicament to be in, to say the least. So I learned patience. The second thing I learned for certainly is humility, because I know for a fact that when I thought I went into this invincible, that there really is not power of your own that you're here. The other thing that changed me is I always felt like from that day forward, every day was just a bonus, that I was living on borrowed time, and it was a gift from God. And I will mention that during that first night in the emergency room, in surgery, that during the actual surgery, I had an out-of-body experience where I looked down and saw myself on the gurney on the table where they operated and worked over me. And I was taken away on my journey. And on the way, I was met by an angel. And I know she was a woman, but I didn't recognize her. She was definitely female. And she didn't speak verbally to me, but I could tell what she was saying in my mind. She was speaking to me, and she told me that I don't know why I was given more time. I needed to do something else, but there was a reason that she had sent me back. And I remember I wanted to move forward, and I felt her push me back into my body. So that's why I'm here today. So lots were learned from it, but humility, to tie it back, that was a humbling experience for sure. So, how we doing on time, Pastor? I got another story? Okay. Kind of an example with humility that still creeps up once in a while, where we think we're better than we really are, and we really aren't. And so one thing that I would mention is, most of you know that Veronica and I, we own a tax firm. So we're considered experts in numbers. So, excuse me while I find my notes. Here we go. But when you're thinking you're an expert, God has a way of really reminding you who He is. So recently we've had some experiences in our life I'd like to share that are kind of fun, where we've come to the agreement that God's math is better than our math. You know, I think all of us would agree 2 + 2 is 4. That's a given. We all know that. We know 2 + 2 is 4. But God's math goes something like this. 2 + 2 times Jesus is to multiply things cross-potentially. I'll say that again so you catch it. 2 + 2 times Jesus multiplies things cross-potentially. So let me give you a little story from when Veronica and I were first married to kind of demonstrate this. We got together right about 08, 07 when the economy took a real hit. At that time, I was thinking I was hugely successful, had living the dream, had a wonderful job, and overnight I went from 6 figures to almost nothing. The industry died, literally died, and I had nothing. And I met Veronica, and she was working at a firm, and about that same time, she got laid off right after tax season. So we both found ourselves overnight with no job, no income, no nothing. So I didn't qualify for any kind of unemployment because I was self-employed. I was an independent contractor, so I didn't have any benefits. And Veronica went in and applied, and we thought, well, we can at least live on some unemployment until we find employment, some unemployment benefits. So she went in and applied, and in filling out the form, because she's the honest person she is, there was a little box that said, do you have any plans in the future of opening your own business? And we talked about it. We wanted to have our own firm, and yeah, that sounded like a good idea. So being honest, she checked the box. Well, automatically they declined her entire claim and said, if you have a business, you don't qualify. So now she had no benefits. I had no benefits. So we were living literally on nothing, and food was running out, and we were desperate. And God put us in a spot where we had to turn to Him. And we had a talk one day, and we said, we have no food for the month. We have to go grocery shopping, and we had two $20 bills. We had $40. That was it. And God just kind of put on us and said, go buy what you need. I'll take care of you. So we talked about it, and we thought, well, off to Winco we go. So as we walked around the store and we had our list of all the things we needed, the basket got fuller and fuller and fuller, and we had no credit cards. They were maxed out. We had nothing but this $40, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredibly embarrassing when we go through the check stand, because there's hundreds of dollars of food in this basket, literally, and we just kept getting told, just, I'll take care of you, believe in me. So we went through, and we went to the check stand, and they ran through, and added it all up. And when they added the tax to it, the sales tax at the 6.5%, and they taxed it all, and they turned to us, and the lady looks at us, and she says, that'll be $40. To the penny. And she almost kind of looked back, because she see this cart was like, what? But then she just said, yep, that's all you owe, $40. So we went home, and we had our needs met. And that's how God's math works. It works way better than our math, thank goodness. So we've been blessed other times. Years later, when we moved here, I was working as a diamond buyer, and I traveled 5 states and bought groups of diamonds from people. I have a diamond buying certificate that was part of my background, so it's not a common thing, but at one, I did an exceptionally good job for this business owner, and she blessed me and gave me a $100 bill for a tip, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I don't ever get a tip in this job. This is, great. I got this $100. So for weeks, we talked about what we're going to do with this $100, and every time we made a decision, we're going to go spend that $100, something blocked us. And I carried it in my wallet, and something else would come up, and we'd say, yeah, we're going to go spend that today. We're going to go out to dinner. Boom, something happens. Nope. And we carried this $100 and carried this $100. And one day, we're together. We took some people at our church to get some ice cream at Baskin-Robbins. And while we're sitting there, she looks at me kind of funny, and I looked at her, and she leaned over, and she says, did you hear that? And I said, yeah. We're supposed to give them this $100, right? And I said, yeah. Like, okay. So out of my wallet we went, and we gave this couple $100. Of course, they were graciously accepted, and we blessed them, and we were happy with that and didn't expect a thing in return. In our business, before we started here, you wouldn't have seen it, but we had a Ford Explorer, and we had decals on it with our business name, and we had some cool little business card holders that held cards in a plastic holder on the side. And it got us some good business driving around. It was nice advertisement. So the next morning, our business phone rang, and I picked up the phone. And this lady said, hey, I've been praying. I really need some tax help. I got a really bad issue. Can you guys help me? So we went through a whole discussion on what we do. And she said, great, I'd like to hire you. Talked to her. She says, I'm write you a check right now for a deposit. I'm going to pay $1,000. Exactly 10 times what we gave. And when she wrote the check, she stopped and handed it to me, and she looked at me funny, and she said, and I'm supposed to tell you, I got your card off the car in front of Baskin-Robbins last night. So, once again, the Lord blessed us beyond belief, and He continues to bless us, and we're so grateful for it. So, I guess to close, I would just say, Pastor Mike posed the question to me, what does a glorious and victorious church look like? And what I came to understand after my study and preparation is love, honor, serve, and remain humble. And how that works is we should honor one another through service with humility and genuine love that exceeds the love of self. These things alone bring brightness, beauty, and radiance to a dark and fallen world, that we may glorify our Father, Creator of heaven, earth, and all that is. In Jesus' holy name. Amen.